So without further ado, what I'd like to do is to start those interviews off, and I'd like to ask Caroline and John if they'd like to come up.
Not to touch it.
Not to touch it, please. I'm told. Far enough away. Okay, now you probably know John, but John and Rachel and their two boys come on Sundays, and we just thought we would have some interviews, really talking a little bit about COVID and how that, lockdown and what that effect that has been on us, but also some of the sort of challenges and some of the encouragements. So John, I was going to just ask you, what has been some of the challenges for you as a family with COVID and the lockdown?
Yeah, well, we actually did an interview, didn't we, with Rob on one of the services, which some of you might have seen. I feel like I'm preaching up here. This is really odd. It was. I think the challenge for us was with the boys. I mean, they're the blessing as well, but also the challenge. Because when we didn't have childcare for them, and me and Rachel were still trying to work. So it was 3 days a week when we were both trying to work full time whilst looking after two boys. That was pretty tough. So I suppose for us really, since lockdown was eased, like full lockdown, life's become seemingly a lot easier. But yeah, it's a challenge, but at the same time, I think certainly I speak for myself when I say God's done a lot of sanctifying work in that time, because He deals with some of the selfishness that you have within you, that it breaks it down through those times, and you come through it all the stronger for it. So yeah, that I suppose that's reflected, and I think Rachel would say probably something similar.
And that's so often, isn't it, that through the tough times, actually the Lord refines us, and that's actually good when we look back on it, even if it was tough at the time. Yeah, definitely. What have been some of the encouragements for you, John? What sort of things have been encouraging through this period of time?
Yeah, so that I would say certainly that kind of the feeling that you feel of the change within yourself. Also, just being able to spend that time with the boys as well, which is, I'm lucky in that I work from home. So I already see them a lot more than perhaps some other parents would, but even more so during lockdown, such a critical point of their life as well, where they're growing. But then I have to say as well, actually, coming out the other side of lockdown, holiday club, the fact that was able to go ahead, and because I'd been looking forward to that. It was my first year since sort of coming back to the church. I've been looking forward to it for so long, and then it was like, it's not going to happen.
Because I think the last time you'd helped was when you were about 12 or 13?
Well, you probably know better than me, Caroline. It must have been. Jess Lahane actually sent me a picture on WhatsApp of me. I think it was Holiday Club 1987, and I sent it to my Connect group, and I was dancing to a song that David Rowe was singing on his guitar at the front, probably sing a joyful noise unto the Lord, I would have thought.
So that's more like 30 years ago.
That was a long time ago. For me, I think I was really looking forward to getting stuck back in, kind of, I suppose picking up where I left off a little bit with that. And so, you guys did such a great job to get Holiday Club going and to make that work in such difficult circumstances.
And what did you find at leading a Holiday Club? What did you find encouraging from that?
Well, I suppose for me, it was an odd one really, because I didn't know any different. So everybody else at Holiday Club, I could tell, they were all kind of like, this is just not the same as it is normally. But it's been a long time for me, so for me, I was like, as far as I'm concerned, this is what Holiday Club's like. And that first day, wasn't it? You'd done all that prep, and that first day, we were in here, and there was a storm outside. Caroline was down on the floor there, leading us all in a Bible study. We were literally getting rained on. And I think just seeing God's work in that and how that still played out, we still managed to do it. And personally as well, Caroline, and I think I said this to you in an email, didn't I? I really loved the way you got us all together for a Bible study before. And every day, and even in that kind of storm and in the chaos, you were kind of, you were leading us in that study, and it really felt like God's hand was on it. And so that for me as a leader, I really enjoyed that. And doing it with Freddie, because that was a bit special.
I mean, I think we did feel very strongly, didn't we, that the Lord was incredibly kind to us, that we managed to bring it in one day and do it all inside, which we hadn't planned at all.
Yeah, definitely.
And seeing so many children who don't normally come on Sundays, that was a great encouragement, wasn't it?
It was. And I don't lead the kids groups on a Sunday, so disseminating the children who might come more regularly from not was harder for me, but yeah, as I understood it, yeah, there were a lot, and certainly it was lovely to see them, and I think it's so important because, like in lockdown, kids weren't at school, and so they're not getting any kind of the normal stimulus that they would be, and so yeah, okay, it's half a day and it's socially distanced and all that sort of thing, but I think for you to put that on, and you really had to press on and be determined in putting that on, was such valuable, input for them and encouragement for them at such a sensitive age anyway, and then all this is going on. So yeah, that first day with the storm kind of felt kind of metaphorical for the for the whole experience.
Yeah. Oh well, thank you for leading and helping us with it, because it was great.
Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
And
it was a joy.
yeah, we keep on praying for the children and their families, that they might continue to ponder what they've heard. That actually this might have been a moment where some of them in the future say, that was the day, that was the week that I came to know the Lord Jesus. That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to hand over to Rob now. And Rob,
Sorry, Janet.
I'll follow Caroline's lead and stand over here if Andrew would like to join me. We were hoping that Sue would be able to be here tonight, but sadly she's not able to. So the men are ruling at the moment. It's not meant to be all men's interviews, but hey, that's how it works out. But anyway, Andrew, you and Sue, like everybody, were locked down, and loads of stuff in your life was cancelled during the period. But I think some new opportunities arose, and I would just love you to share a little bit about that with everybody that's here tonight.
Yeah, sure. Because we couldn't run Lunch Club, the team couldn't run it, then Mike Stevenson has been writing this leafly sort of news, and as well as including a gospel message that we've been able to circulate. Lots of people have been circulating it around to people who would normally come to Lunch Club. And the idea was that we could actually knock on people's door and say, hi, how are you doing? And here's the newsletter. And that's been really great, because we've met and been able to talk and got to know quite a lot of people. We've got to know the husband of somebody who comes to Lunch Club who himself, he doesn't come. And so we've been able to talk to him and build up a relationship with him. And a lot of the people were really pleased to see you at the door, because they're not seeing a lot of people. So that's been great. We built up relationships with people.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic opportunity. So there are about 92 people that received this letter fortnightly. Obviously, quite a lot of them may be living in places where we can't go door to door. But I think you do maybe a dozen, something like that. And then there must be another 30 or 40 of them that are actually, where you knock the door and speak to people. Now, it's a mixed experience. I think Andrew and Sue, a lot of your people are nearly always in, and you have great conversations.
Yeah.
Others of us haven't had quite the same thing. But I mean, even myself, there happen to be quite a few living near where I am, and there's a couple of them where we've got quite a proper sort of friendship thing going, and it's quite lovely, which I wouldn't ever have had that opportunity. So I've been blessed by sharing a similar sort of opportunity that you've had. But also in the summer, you would normally run holiday at St Mary's for this group and for others. Of course, that was cancelled. But just like Caroline with the children, you weren't going to give up. So what did you do?
Well, it was an idea from Caroline, actually, that maybe we could think about having some afternoon teas, sticking to 6 people in the garden, and whether or not we could organise that, and whether or not there people would be interested. So using this distribution that we were doing anyway, And we asked people, and we got actually about 50 people wanted to come to an afternoon tea. So we organised about 6 different venues. People like Jane Beckwith and yourself actually had afternoon teas, and some more than one afternoon tea. And we invited these people along, and it was just great. So we had a craft, and people could have cake and a quiz and all those sort of things. And but again, it was like building the relationships with these people, and being, for us, we were able to invite somebody who hadn't been out for months and months, and would have to come in a wheelchair and so on, but they were able to come out and actually chat to people and have, meet other people from Lunch Club. It was really great, and we thank God because He blessed that. Really.
Yeah, so do be praying for the team, because obviously now we're thinking, they're all on the doorstep saying, when can we come and have a meal with you again? And of course it's very difficult, so do be praying for the Lunch Club team as they think, what can we do more, and how can we maintain this relationship, and how can we move forward appropriately under the circumstances. So that would be great. The other thing I wanted to ask you and Sue, Andrew, is coming back to church. Of course, all these guys have come back to church, which is great. But I was just wondering, when you had the opportunity to come back physically, with all these restrictions, masks and distancing and no singing, why did you still think it was worth the effort of coming back, and what's been your experience in doing that?
Well, why? Because it's just so great to meet with other Christians, even though you can't really have a conversation like you normally would, perhaps. But so it's just great to be here now and see other Christians, meet with other Christians. I know that that's what we're called to do, isn't it, as Christians? And so what's been difficult about it? Well, that you got to wear masks and be distant, and that you can't really come up and shake somebody's hand or whatever. That's a difficult bit, perhaps. Maybe not singing as well. So it's a different way to worship together, but it's just worth coming because you see people.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you very much for that, Andrew. It's been lovely to interview you.
Can I invite our next interviewee, up to the podium? You're going to go for that.
I've got a microphone.
Okay.
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Great. Thank you for being willing to be grilled.
Just tell us who you are and tell us a bit about family and things.
So my name is Rob Bowen. I am married. I have 3 children. They are all hopefully on the way to bed at the moment. Not my wife. But we have been coming to St Mary's really since January. We live locally, have lived locally for a while. We've been going to church in another church locally for a long time. But as our children have started to get a little bit older, we thought it was really important to try and encourage community for the children to be growing up. And so we were looking around trying to find somewhere that would be able to support the children in a slightly different way to the experience that they've been having before. So we prayed hard about it and decided that St Mary's was the place for us to come and join in.
And it's great to have you join us, of course. You came in January. There were some quite big events that happened a couple of months later. How was that? How was the experience of that?
Honestly, it was really tough. So we were really after more of a Christian community for us, but also for the children. And that was one of the really attractive things about moving to a church that's of this size, where there is a community here, and we wanted to be a part of that. So we had got to the point where we'd probably done maybe 5 or 6 services. We were just starting to recognise some people, trying to sit in roughly the same place and spot the same people. But then unfortunately that all stopped, which was difficult. So we tried to do lots virtually, but as we've all found out, doing lots virtually is not the same. It was okay for for Ali and me, we were reasonably used to doing the things that we were doing virtually, so coming to some of the services was okay. But again, we didn't really feel part of the community. I think the children found it really, really difficult. Slightly unsettling for them, having moved, just started to make new friends, and then trying to interact over a screen, I think is hard.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure lots of us can understand some of that as well. And how has the experience been coming back physically for you and the children?
It's been fantastic. So we came back really as quickly as we could, as soon as the doors were open, which has been great. It's not been the same as church services were before. Again, we've all been experiencing things in different ways. But it has been really fantastic. For us, the most important thing is meeting new people and actually being able to talk to people face to face, with masks on, but still face to face, and having that real interaction for us is really, really important. And it's been something that we've been able to benefit from. And particularly for the children, going back into their groups, having the sort of energy, enthusiasm, and the interaction of being back in the groups has been really great. So we're very grateful for that.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question? You thought that was it. But I guess people might be watching this, or people maybe here who haven't quite brought their families back and maybe got all sorts of valid questions about, with masks and lack of singing and social distancing, is it worth doing? I was wondering what you would say to that. That sounds like a setup, doesn't it?
A leading question. Definitely worth it, and so I would strongly encourage people to come back because there are all the different precautions that we've got. As I look out at people sitting here, we've got huge gaps between people. Everybody's wearing a mask. It is safe, or it's as safe as it can be. For those people with children, maybe you're doing a much better job than we are if you're managing to do this at home. But for us, actually having the space, the opportunity for the children to run around with other children, to make and keep those Christian friendships, to start building that community that I spoke about, is something that's really, really important and really valuable for us and for them.
Coming and speaking to us.
Thanks very much. I hope that was useful. I certainly found it interesting to hear what different people's experiences have been over the last 6 or more months now. What we're going to do now, excuse me, is turn to the formal part of the proceedings. And I think Philip, you're going to lead that section, aren't you?
Thank you, Jefferson. Well, actually, before we do the formal part of the proceedings, I'm going to embarrass Caroline and get her to come up. Please, Caroline. So yesterday, just a couple of us were around when we gave Caroline a big bunch of flowers and some chocolates, because yesterday was 25 years since Caroline was ordained in the old church. So 25 years ago, Caroline was ordained and started work here, and has been here for 25 years. So Caroline, well, there's so much we could say, but we just want to say thank you so much for all that you've brought under God to St Mary's. All the children who have learnt so much under your care, and so many of the women who've learnt lots from you, and all of us lots from you. So just a little card as well, just with our thanks, and thank you for...
One of the things I mentioned early on was that we thought it might be helpful actually to explain a bit about what the vacancy process is. I know I was trying to decide, we don't quite look like the two bodies, do we? But there's a Mel and those two, what's that then? We're a bit too far away, aren't we, to lead in a little more. But what we thought was we might do a sort of bit of a Q&A on what's this vacancy process thing, and how does all that kind of thing work? So the form of it is I'm going to ask some questions to Philip, and he's going to try and say try, and he's going to clearly answer. That's not a great way to start, is it, really? But just to try and give you an idea as to what this whole process involves, really. So to fill it, first of all, I suppose, let's say some of us, let's say most of us, really have no idea how a rector is actually chosen, what the formal process of that is. And maybe there are some people who think, oh, well then, now we've had these elections here, actually it's the people who have been elected in one form or another who can actually appoint a rector. But that's not how it works, is it? So how does it actually work? Who gets to choose a new rector?
So there are sort of really three parts to how someone is chosen. So the bishop or his representatives in the diocese, they have a big say in who comes. The patron is very much involved in choosing, and two people who are PCC representatives are important. So it's actually three lots: bishop, patron, PCC who choose.
Okay, so there's a variety of people involved. Now, I suppose most people understand in that what a bishop is. I think we talk about the PCC, and we just had elections for the PCC, but this other word, a patron, we don't really come across that very often. So what's a patron?
So in the Church of England, so every parish, every benefice has a patron, that's historical for all sorts of reasons. So, and a patron can vary, it can be all sorts of things. So, for example, just currently or just recently, All Souls Langham Place have been in vacancy. Hugh Palmer retired, and they've been advertising, and the adverts there show that the Crown is the patron. So Her Majesty is the patron of All Souls Langham Place. In lots of places, the bishop is the patron. In other places, the patron may be just an individual or a rich landowner or a family or something like that. Sometimes there are several patrons, so it might be the bishop and a family. Often, other examples are sort of some of the college, so like some of the Oxford colleges are. So quite a few of the parishes in our deanery and in this area, one of their several of them have as a patron an Oxford college. So someone from that college comes and helps to choose their next vicar. Then there are also a lot of societies who are patrons. Now our patron is the Church Pastoral Aid Society. There are other evangelical bodies like Simeon's Trust and Church Society. They all have different number of churches which they're patrons. CPAS is an evangelical Anglican mission organisation started back in the 19th century, and is a great body. So some of you, for example, will remember that say like Rob would have gone not this year, but in previous years, been on a summer camp, and you can think of some of our previous curates, Nick Weir and Chris Keane and others that we know were involved in summer camps, and they were all venture summer camps, which are all under the CPAS umbrella. So CPAS does camps, it does lots of training of clergy across the evangelical part of the Church of England, really, and it also has this huge patronage department, because actually CPS has got 700, I think it's 700 patronage churches of which it's the patron. It's grown a bit over years because it's sort of amalgamated a few from other organisations. So actually, whereas say like an Oxford college or some place or an individual might just have a few, and they're not very sort of used to doing it. CPS, because it's got a permanent patronage secretary. So they change from time to time, and there's now a guy called Reverend Mike Duff. So his full-time job is the patronage secretary at CPS. His whole job is just involved in helping parishes through vacancy. And then there's another lady who if you look in the church press at the adverts that CPS have, then you'll see her name, Kathy Birch. She's sort of like his assistant, and she's been doing the job for 18 years. So knows all there is to do about patronage and so on. So our patron is CPS, so CPAS, and they also have a sort of body of trustees who who are the patronage trustees, and they're often sort of ministers and others from across the Anglican evangelical world, and there are, so there are people of different flavours within the evangelical world, but there are also amongst the trustees people who would identify absolutely with us here at St Mary's, really.
So it sounds like overall we think it's a good thing that we've got CPAS as our patron, and because they're very experienced, they do this a lot, they'll understand the process and how to work it. But we started off by saying there were 3 different influences, if you like. And we said there's the patron, there's the bishop or the diocese, and then there's the parish of PCC. So how does that all fit together? How do they interact in terms of getting someone appointed there?
Well, I mean, because everyone's involved in choosing, which I'll come on to in just a moment. I mean, but that sort of ensures that the bishop, because the bishop and his team are involved, it ensures that he gets a minister who he's happy to have. He's after all got to have whoever the person is in his diocese, so he's happy with that. The patron, the patron, as we've said, is very much involved, but the parish representatives are involved as well, and so they're also happy that the person is the person appointed is the right sort of person for the parish. So the system works so that hopefully all 3 can be happy. That's the ideal. That's how it's supposed to work.
Okay. And so for us, from where we are right now, Clive hasn't formally left out. He's still around. So going from that to the new man starting, maybe you can step us through the steps and the process that need to happen.
So, well, it starts. So yeah, you're right. Clive officially retires as rector of Eastrop on the 31st of October, although his last Sunday was at the end of September. But very helpfully, after Bishop David came on Clive's last day, a couple of days later, he made sure that, which we're really grateful to him for doing that, just getting on with it. He probably had to ask Bishop Tim to do it, to instruct that a vacancy notice was issued. So this vacancy notice, which basically says, the parish of Eastrop the benefice of Eastrop becomes vacant on the 31st of October, and that has to be sent to the patron, to notify the patron, not that the patron didn't already know because we'd already told them, but sent officially to the patron and sent officially to us. So the patron received it, Ruth Williamson as the PCC secretary received it, Jack Jefferson and I as church wardens also received it, a couple of other people. So that sort of kicks the process off, really. Actually, the timing is slightly awkward, it's slightly unfortunate, because we as church wardens, we're going to meet Archdeacon Richard Brown tomorrow evening. So we're going to meet him online virtually, and that will be, that's him talking to us as church wardens. Just to digress slightly, I mean, we're obviously hugely fortunate because we have Rob and Caroline, so we have ministers and we have lots of people, very capable in St Mary's of doing stuff. You can imagine lots of churches, the vicar goes, there's no other ministers, lots of people, not many people do stuff, and they think, what are we going to do, So the Archdeacon comes and talks to the church wardens, and I mean, I guess tomorrow what we're going to be talking to him about is just about running church during the vacancy process. So that part of it, I guess he's also going to talk to us about things like what happens to the rector's house. Normally they would rent a house out, but I've got a feeling that because of COVID and because of changes in rental rules, because of that may not be so easy. So we don't know the answer to that quite yet, but we'll wait to see what we hear from him tomorrow. So that's that. But then just a few days later, we're meeting with him again, but then with Mike Duff, the patronage secretary from CPAS, and that is for them, again, it's slightly funny really, in theory, that's for them to come and explain to us how the whole process works. well, I think we know how the process works, but that doesn't matter. What actually will be very helpful to talk to them is because what we don't know is, we've mugged up very well on what the process is, but what we don't quite know is what the implications of pandemic and COVID and everything is on the process, and that will be quite helpful. Although, only yesterday I had some stuff through from CPS personally, and in it it's talking about, that they are still able to carry on, that we're talking about some interviews happening in other churches, interviews for new clergy happening in the next couple of weeks. So things are happening. But I guess it would be quite helpful to talk to him about that really.
So I suppose another thing would be, if we think about, so far it's been us getting information, hasn't it, quite a lot of it. And I'm thinking about then, so how do we make potential candidates aware of...
Can I tell you some other things before that? Can I just tell you about the PCC? Because Archdeacon Richard, he may want to come, he's going to talk to us. He often goes and talks to a PCC as well to explain the process. Again, we've already explained the process to the PCC and given the PCC all the stuff that the diocese sends out and that CBS sent out. So I think but again, it'd be helpful if he wants to come. And Bishop David is also coming to talk to the PCC in November, so we booked him in to come early in November. And then, I suppose, going on a bit to what you're saying, asking Jefferson, so the PCC has to prepare a parish profile and a person specification. So have to write this document, or have a document that gives a description of the parish, tells people what St Mary's is like, what sort of church we are, what sort of things go on here, so that people know. And it needs to be an honest description. There's no point painting some ridiculously rosy description of how we are. It needs to be, warts and all, but obviously saying all the good stuff there is, but also being honest where we think maybe we could improve. And it hopefully it's attractive to potential applicants, but at the same time, as I say, being realistic. And then there's also a person specification as part of this document, and the person specification sort of enables us to be quite specific about the sort of person, the sort of minister that we want to have. So, for example, if we want to have someone who will faithfully preach from the Bible, well then we need to specify that. The person specification has to say that.
So there's a process of preparing, I suppose, us being really clear what we want, and also I think what we don't want as well. So there's that's some of what you're talking about, isn't it? Saying we want someone who definitely will do this and it won't be like that. And in fact, so there's a couple of things on that. One is I think we've been looking, haven't we, externally at some examples of that we've come across over for some time, knowing this time was going to be coming, to see what other examples were like. And that was helpful. And now we've put a draft in front of some other people at the PCC. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's been, we've had sort of heads up that this was coming at some point. So for over a year or so, we've kept our eye out on adverts in the church press. And it's quite possible to download a whole selection of good and not so good parish profiles from other places, and we've obtained a few from other contacts. And so we've had a good idea of what parish profiles are all about and what sort of things attract good ministers really. And then a small group of us in the BCC have worked on some initial drafts, and now we're sort of reworking it with all the BCC. We're intentionally way ahead of the timetable. Officially, it's interesting. There are people who've even stood up in General Synod and said quite rightly, you should have your parish profile prepared years before your minister leaves. Well, we haven't done that, and Clive hasn't been involved in it. It's just been asked. But so there's nothing wrong in doing that. As I say, people say that, stand up on the floor of General Synod and say you should do that. Officially, the process is that we wait until the Archdeacon comes, until they come and talk to us and tell us about everything, and then then we do it. And that's fine, but there's no harm in us starting in advance. So we're a bit ahead of the normal timetable, and at this point we're just starting to discuss with the BCC, starting to fine-tune it a bit and modify it.
Now, I think despite the fact that you are, we're trying to explain this process, I suspect to quite a lot of the people here, and perhaps online, it sounds probably quite involved. There's quite a lot of technicalities, and there's quite a lot of wording and stuff like that. Does that mean, and also some of this stuff is being prepared by a small handful of people, does that mean nobody else in our church can contribute to what effectively is going to be our shop window on attracting someone? Does it mean that, Philip?
No, it doesn't. I mean, obviously it doesn't. Can't have. It's even hard for the whole PCC just to write a thing, so it does need to be a group of people, but then the PCC contributing to it. And we certainly couldn't have everyone in church trying to write every single bit of it. But that's not what you're asking me. So one thing we hope to be able to do, we'd like to do, is to ask everyone in church a few questions, really. So probably the sort of questions will be, what are the 3 or 4 things that you most value about the life of church here at St Mary's? What are the things that are most important to you in our church life here? And then maybe another question, what are the areas that you think we should be growing in, or we could improve in, or something like that. So I think we want to do that. We just have to work out exactly how easiest to do that. But it would be great if lots of us in the congregation can respond to those questions, and then that can be fed back into reflected in the profile. And the other thing just to say is that Bishop Tim, our diocesan bishop, and probably also Bishop David, our suffragan, and our area dean, they also write something. So like the sort of front page is the bishop writing something and the area dean writing something as a sort of introduction to the profile and an introduction to the minister who's coming to this diocese and this deanery. And in fact, the archdeacon and the bishop, they'll also read what we've written. I mean, hopefully they're not going to scrub it all out. We'd argue strongly against them doing that unless there was some HR reason why we couldn't write something or something like that. But they will look at it and hopefully agree it before we finalise it.
So it sounds like, so rightly, because we said the last time I made a point was 34 years ago, right? So this is quite a big deal, isn't it, in terms of the impact this had. So rightly then, we put this effort into getting our parish profile, which says this is what we are like, truthfully, and this is what we're seeking. And presumably, until that gets finalised, we can't then go out and say, right now, here's the job ad, if you like. So how do we finalise that? When does that happen?
So sort of hopefully within a month or maybe a bit longer from the start of the vacancy, excuse me, the BCC will hold what's called a Section 11 meeting. It's a formal meeting. It's called Section 11 because that's the section in the 1986 patronage benefices measure part of church law, and that says that tells you how you have to do these things. And at this at that meeting, the BCC has to formally agree the parish profile. So hopefully we'll have discussed it and thought about it before. But at that point, we formally agree it. So that meeting might be end of November, beginning of December, something like that. We formally agree the parish profile. And there are a couple of other things, statutory things that we have to do at that point. We have to also then, as a PCC, we have to choose the 2 representatives who will then go on to represent the parish in the process beyond that point, really. So up to that point, the whole PCC is involved. After that, just 2 representatives are representing the parish. So the PCC has to nominate those 2 people, and I guess we will also, as a PCC, look back at our resolution under the House of Bishops declaration, the declaration that says that we would want to have a male incumbent, and we also we have to decide the 4 things we have to do. One, we have to decide whether we want to ask the patron to advertise the vacancy, and if they do, it's at our cost.
No, of course it is. So we get all that together, we get it finalised, we're ready to advertise. What then? What happens next?
So CPS will place adverts. I mean, again, if we ask them, if we decide to advertise, then they'll go into the Church Times or wherever. The advert also goes onto onto the CPS website. It's there. They have a vacancy list. There's also, there are quite a few other places. There's a sort of Church of England website where it will probably appear as well. And then there are other networks and organisations, that we can notify. So for example, just to name one, Bishop Rob Thomas has a mailing that he sends out to churches like ours. He'll advertise it as well. And then we need to keep praying, carry on praying and praying that the right people apply. And applicants will apply to, applicants, when they apply, they will apply to CPS. They send their applications to CPS, and it's the CPS patronage trustees who then go through those applications and select who they're going to interview. They do ask for the opinion of the bishop or his deputies, and they do ask for opinions of the two parish reps. But it's their decision ultimately who gets shortlisted, taking on board the advice from those other, from the diocese and from the PCC. And then they'll draw up a shortlist, usually of 3 candidates. It's helpful. You might. I'm aware of various other vacancies that have happened in our area over the last year or two, and slightly further afield. And you'd be amazed. Some churches have 1 or 2 applicants. That's all they get. One place had no applicants initially, but hopefully that won't be the case for us. And in fact, Sherburn St John Church, which just down the road, which is also conservative evangelical like us, they had 9 applicants, so completely different to some of the other local churches. That was just last year.
So let's say we're going to imagine we had 9 or a good number of candidates. There's a short list of 3. What happens then? Is it that they're all invited in? They all do some preaching from the front? What happens?
No, that definitely doesn't happen. That is what happens that's what happens in independent churches, big churches who come and preach. But no, that definitely doesn't happen in the Church of England. In fact, it's quite secret, the process, and there's quite tight confidentiality. And the reason for that really is partly so that if people are looking at other jobs, obviously most of them aren't. If there are a number of applicants, only one of them is going to get it. So the idea is so that their existing congregations don't start getting worried because their ministry is about to keep wanting to move and so on. So it is quite confidential, really. So they definitely don't come and preach, but they do. But then they will be invited for an interview day or 2 days. Often in lots of places in the past it's been for 2 days, but currently with in the COVID era it may just be 1 day. So they'll come if they're married, they'll come with their wife, and in fact all the candidates will come, but then they'll be shown around separately around the parish and meet a few people and so on, and then be interviewed. They often are asked to do a little talk, but not to a whole church, just to the interview panel. They sometimes have to do a 10 minute little sermonette, which they have to each give.
Okay, so it's a confidential process. It's behind closed doors. There's a defined selection panel. Who actually does the interviewing then?
So the patron's representative. So in our case, it may be Mike Duff, or he may deputise it to someone else, someone like David Banting or someone like him. So it'll be someone from CPS who often maybe, I don't know, again we'll find out, but often they're whereas usually the bishop is the chairman. I think because CPS is such big, they often are the chair, which is quite good. So anyway, the patrons, someone from the patrons, and then the bishop and or the Archdeacon. So Bishop David, I suspect we'll get Bishop David and Archdeacon Richard, and the rural dean, and the 2 parish reps. So there are at least six people.
Okay, so there's a fair number of inputs there, isn't there?
But I suppose I should just say that this person specification that the PCC agreed, that's the reference point in the interviews. So that's the reference point against which the candidate is assessed. And so even if the bishop or the archdeacon or the patron have slightly different views about church life to us, what we're asking for is what that person's specification that everyone has agreed is, and so the people applying have to fit that person's specification. So you're not going to. So if someone comes along and says, no, I don't, I'm just going to preach from the Bible occasionally. Well, no one like that is ever going to. I mean, they obviously aren't even going to get to the interview, but you see what I mean. They have to do that. But hopefully agreement is reached at the end of the interview. But if the other members, I mean, hopefully this very rarely happens, but if the other members, and I don't think it will happen at all in our case, because we get on very well with David, Bishop David, and Richard, our Archdeacon, and Richard, the area dean, so I'm sure it will be fine. But if they suddenly were pressing for someone who the parish reps didn't think was the right person, the parish reps do have a veto, so the parish reps can veto. It isn't 4 against 2. They have the veto.
Good. It's good to know, isn't it? So, okay, so we're kind of getting down. We're saying it sounds quite a hard process. This, isn't it? There's quite a lot involved. Let's say so. We get to the end of the interviews. There's agreement about who it is. Is it then the case that there's a burst of excitement from someone? They run out of the room and they broadcast it to the congregation. Is that how it works next?
No, I'm afraid not yet. So there are various formal checks that have to be done, and depending on where the new minister is coming from, then coordinated announcements need to be made. So it may take some weeks after the interview before the actual identity of the person can be disclosed, really.
Okay, but after all this long process, presumably then it starts really quickly. It's really quick.
Well, again, that depends on who it is. It depends on what sort of notice has to be given in the current role. It may depend on timings with family. Who knows? And I guess we're going to have a little bit better idea of the likely timescale, after our discussion next week with Archdeacon Richard Brand and Mike Duff. But yeah, it's likely to be a little while.
Okay.
Who knows?
Philip, I realise that there's quite a lot of information there, isn't there? I hope you can see that there's a defined process. I think actually for where we are right now in terms of timing, I think things have got off to a good start in terms of preparation. There's a lot of preparation that's happened. I think what we're seeing is quite a quick response from the people in the diocese that we're dealing with in terms of they have an appetite to get this process underway quickly. So, Philip, thank you very much for explaining that.
So because we're in this sort of funny time, and because we haven't got a rector, it'd be very easy for us just to be sort of marking time, really, or just sort of sitting back and we'll just wait till the new minister's appointed. So, what are we as a church? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to do over the next few months? What are we about?
I'm glad you asked. I'm so glad Clive got us to look at Acts before he went. It was almost like he knew what he was doing. Because Acts, personally, for me, has been a real reminder that it is Jesus who's building his church. And this age, until his return, which could be any point, is about him building his church. Now, of course, we believe in ministers, and it's really important we get godly ministers leading churches. But ultimately, it's Jesus' church, and he's going to be building it. One of the things I've been struck by in Acts is just how much that building takes place within the church. So, of course, Acts kind of gets you to think about the mission out to the ends of the earth. Of course it does. But also, it's interesting how the Apostle Paul goes around strengthening the congregations as well. So I printed off a couple of verses earlier, where it talks about the church in Judea, Galilee and Samaria, this is 9 verse 31, enjoyed a time of peace and was strengthened, and it increased in numbers. And then on Paul's missionary journey, we read in 16 verse 5, the churches were strengthened in faith and grew daily in numbers. Now, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I wonder if Luke is making a link there, that as they grow up internally, they will also grow externally as well. But you have to decide if that's right yourself. But I think it's right in saying that we want to do those two things. So we want to just make sure we continue to grow internally, and we're continuing to think externally. So our big aim as a staff team, and it really isn't just me, as a staff team and as a congregation, I hope, is to focus internally, growing up and growing out over these next few months.
Okay, so what are we going to be a bit more specific? What are we going to do for growing internally? How are we going to carry on growing, just as our church fellowship together here?
Yeah, well, I guess that's been thrown up in the air these past few months. But it is I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, it is through God's word and through God's will. So we want to be praying and we want to be teaching the word. So we're really pleased to be back on Sundays. That's going to be predominantly how we grow, isn't it? As we listen to the word, as we pray in our services. And this term we're looking for Ephesians. And I've chosen Ephesians because we're at an interesting crossroads in our church life, and Ephesians is about the church. But as well as up front, we're going to do stuff in small groups, and the small groups, the house groups this term, are going to be looking at 6 steps to loving your church, which is a course, a video-based course, which should hopefully make the online thing a bit more interesting. And just a good opportunity of thinking, what is the church? And practically, what does it mean to be part of this church and to be serving others? So that's Sundays, small groups. Connect are going to be looking for a whole Bible overview this next year, God willing. And then we're in the process, and please do pray for us in this, we are in the process of getting the youth groups back up and running slowly, and some of the children's groups back up and running. Obviously we've got to do that in a safe way, but that's what we're trying to do. So that's internally.
And then, what we're going to try and do to carry on reaching out.
Yes.
Beyond our church family here. What are we planning?
Yeah, so I was really encouraged last year when we got the extra bit of the parish, was that we got it?
Yeah.
So we doubled our size. Lots of us were enthusiastic about going out, but then obviously the pandemic hit. But we want to kind of resume that kind of enthusiasm and continue in that work. So Janet has been really on this. Thank you, Janet. Has got me writing a parish magazine, leaflet, or scrap of paper, which we hope to go out into the parish, keeping to Rule 6 and all that, on the 18th of this month. So we just hope that just gives us an opportunity to just say we're here, to put in some hope in quite a hopeless time. And part of the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to just hit people at Christmas. We want to show them that we sort of care about them at the other 11 months of the year as well. So we're going to do that. I've currently drafted an article on kind of finding certainty in an uncertain world. So we're going to do that. Also, we're hoping to get a Christianity to Explore course. I can see Janet's sweating as reel off all these things. So we're hoping to get that up and running. But also, it's worth just saying, obviously evangelism isn't just done kind of centrally, it's done, and you see this in Acts, don't you, as the church is scattered, people have all sorts of conversations with their neighbours, their work colleagues and that sort of thing. So it really is up to all of us to keep doing that work. And I just wonder whether the COVID thing is just giving us a new opening there, just to be honest. Lots of people saying that we can speak about death, it's no longer a taboo. And we can talk about this world being full of suffering. So we just want to encourage one another, don't we, over these next few months to keep up that work. And some of the things being online are really helpful because there's less friction there of getting people into church. So you may work in London, actually you can invite people to church, even if they live, in Hertfordshire or something like that. So that's a little taste of it. Growing in, growing out is the prayer. So please do pray.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed this evening, and I hope you found it informative as well. As we close. Heavenly Father, thank you that you have planted this church here, and that we can be members of it right now. As we go out from here, please help each one of us to keep on contributing to making St Mary's the church of people that you would have us be. Help us to live for you 7 days a week. Help us continue to keep our teaching biblically orthodox and relevant to the issues that we face and others face each day. Help us continue to keep our fellowship warm and caring and supportive. Help us in our worship to remain vital and contemporary, prayer-based and cross-centred. And help us in our mission to be comprehensive, compassionate and evangelistic. In short, help us to be a faithful witness for you here in Basingstoke. Amen.